Grab a cup of tea or listen as you go, ladies. This is your hour with Dr. Zoe, your life and relationship coach. With encouragement, on-point insight, inspiring guests, health tips, and advice, Dr. Zoe helps busy women keep their mind in the game by redefining your superwoman. You're listening to The Dr. Zoe Show.
Hi there, I'm Dr. Zoe, and if you're listening for the first time, I'm a licensed psychotherapist, a life and relationship coach, and I'm a motivational speaker. And I can work with you virtually to help you get unstuck. I believe that every woman has a superpower, and my passion in life is to help you find it, embrace it, and share it with the world. You can connect with me by texting the word JOIN to 38470 or going to my website at drzoeshaw.com. So today we're talking about the 8 pillars of balance for busy women, and we're going to get to that in just a minute. But first, I'm going to share my Superwoman win and my Superwoman fail. I share this every week on the show just to help you women understand that we always have those wins and we always have those fails, and it's just part of the beauty of our chaotic life. And it's okay. We've got to accept it, embrace it, and even honor it in many ways and learn from it. So my Superwoman win today is that I didn't listen to the shoulds in my head about the food that I had to bring to my son's Boy Scout potluck award ceremony. So I don't know how long it is, every couple months, there's an award ceremony at Boy Scouts. And the reality is, as women, we always have these events, for mamas, we have, stuff we have to bring to our kids' school. We have the potlucks, we have whatever. And generally, of course, it's nice for those things to be homemade. But I've been reading Shonda Rhimes' book. I'm going to probably talk about it a lot because I've been kind of binging on her, and she has so much wisdom. And in her book, The Year of Yes, she said that she made a rule for herself that she will always bring food, but she will not bring homemade food to events. If she's going to invest the time in homemade food, it'll be for her own family. And I heard those words, and they just really resonated with me because, I'm a busy woman and there's a lot of shoulds that we have. And hands down to you, kudos to all you mamas who make the beautiful arrangements, who put a lot of creativity into the things that you bring. And the homemade food is awesome, but I'm not necessarily one of those. And sometimes I am, but I don't have to be all the time. And so I was able to get rid of that should. I heard Shonda Rhimes' words in my head, and I ordered pizza and showed up for the potluck and felt amazing. So that's my Superwoman win. My Superwoman fail is that I really overcommitted last week. I just did, and I kind of was slacking in getting everything done. I slacked in getting stuff to my editor for even the podcast and caused her frustration, I'm sure. And I had paperwork and a lot of things that I just didn't get done because I overcommitted. And part of it was because my intern took the week off and I let a few of her balls drop rather than pick them up myself. But what I've learned, and this is a lesson that I keep learning, and I need to learn it for good, is that I need to be more strict about having me business time for planning and taking care of all those little details. I do have the other balance part of the me time, but I need the me business because there's different aspects, different roles that I play. So that was my Superwoman fail for the week, and I did learn from it. So my guest today is Jenny Stemmerman of Your Life Rocks. What an awesome title. She works with working mamas to help them find balance in their life. And I'm sure many of you feel, and sometimes I feel that way too, although I don't believe it, but many of you feel that balance is just not possible. But guess what? Balance is possible, and Jenny helps us figure out how to reframe it and make it work in our life. And sometimes I know that just listening to other women talk about it, we can help reinforce these possibilities for ourselves. The more you listen to these types of conversations, the more you participate and have these conversations with other women, the more that you'll find that you're being balanced, are going further on your journey towards balance, even in the midst of the beautiful chaos that is your life. Did you hear what I said? The beautiful chaos that is your life. Yes, it is beautiful. There's so many blessings and all the things that we have to do. And I love to talk about it as beautiful chaos. So let's dive in. Thank you, Jenny, for coming on the show today. I'm so excited to talk about balance. We women need our balance so much. I wanted to start with the Superwoman win and the Superwoman fail.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. This is a great place to start. So, I am a mom first and foremost, but I wear a lot of many Heather hats as well, as I'm sure a lot of other people do too.
Uh-huh.
I work full time. I own a couple businesses, have a podcast, but I'm really passionate about helping people focus on the positive, focus on the things that are great in life. I think that there's a lot of things in life that can get us down and can really start to steal our focus. And so I really feel like God has called me into this role of kind of shifting that focus a little bit off of the negative and onto the positive. I mean, obviously, real life happens, which brings me right into my fail for this last week. And it's definitely not the best moment. When I recapped it to my 13-year-old later on in the day, he said, "Well, you're mom of the year, aren't you?" I'm like, "Well, thank you, son. Appreciate the encouragement." So my full-time job, I've been able to kind of negotiate it. So I live on the West Coast, but I've been able to negotiate my hours to East Coast hours. So I telecommute, which is awesome to be able to work from home. It definitely has its pros and cons. But with that, it requires very early morning hours and very creatively, getting the kids off to school. And there's certainly some hours in the day that you have to be a little flexible with and kind of juggle a few things. And it can get a little stressful. And the one day last week, I had a meeting, and it was only supposed to be like a 30-minute meeting with someone over Zoom. And my husband's like, "Well, do you want me to take our younger son to school?" And I said, no, it's just a 30-minute meeting. It should be fine. If it runs over, I might need you, but I kind of want to take him. So, I'll take whatever mom time I can get. And that's one of the precious mom times, is walking him to school. So I was like, "Nope, I got it. No problem." And he's like, "Okay, well, just in case, just let me know." Well, the meeting had started to go over, and I noticed I could hear him in the living room. And I noticed that he had stayed a little later than he normally does in the morning before he heads out. And so I had just assumed that he'd taken my younger son to school, like noticing like, okay, her call's running a little late. I'm just going to go ahead and, take him. So I just continued on the call. I didn't try to rush off or anything, just continued on. Well, then that call ran into my next meeting. And so I jumped off of that Zoom and jumped onto another video conference. Meanwhile, school had already been in session for like 30 minutes. And I hear a sneeze, a little sneeze in the living room. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's still here. You didn't take him to school. He's like sitting in the living room waiting. So I put myself on mute and I holler out there, and is that you? And he's like, "Yeah, I'm just waiting for you to take me to school." I was like, oh my gosh, we completely forgot about it. It was like one of those Home Alone moments, right?
Yes.
I was like, oh my gosh. So I had to like find a nice way of telling my boss, "I'm so sorry, but I need to jump out of this meeting. I will be back like in 20 minutes. But it was definitely one of those moments that I was not proud of. It was not one of those moments where I was like, oh my gosh, I say my kids come first, but obviously in that moment, he didn't come first. So that was definitely a fail for me as a mom.
And thank you so much for sharing that fail, because on some level, we have all been there. We all have. And the reality is that we're doing it all. We're trying to do it all. Some balls get dropped here and there. It doesn't make us a total failure, but we have those fails. We have to reframe them. And just like you said, being positive, because what we focus on does grow. But you're kind of my twin. So I'm hearing you. I'm like, that's totally something I would do. And actually, my husband and I had a story like that, except it was picking my daughter up. And we missed, because he picks her up some days, I pick her up other days. And he thought it was my day. I thought it was his day. So yeah, we've been there.
Yeah. And it was one of those things where I just had to kind of choose in that moment. Like at first I was like, oh my gosh, what did you do? And that negative reel started rolling and I was like, no, you know what? I'm just going to laugh about it. And it's going to be one of those moments. So of course I called my husband and I was like, I totally thought that like, I even sent him a text message like, hey, thanks. I did go this call. And he's like, I was wondering what you meant by that text message. And so we just laughed about it. And I was like, oh my gosh, in the future, we need to like, obviously work on our communication skills a little bit better.
Right. Exactly. When you have a busy life, it all comes down to improving that communication. Well, thank you for sharing that fail. We've all been there. So let's hear about your win.
I'm really excited about this one to share, because this is one of those things that, I think sometimes in life we have these goals or things that we aspire to, yet it always is just like just out of reach, right? And and we, no matter how much we want to do it, it's just like we lose traction over time. And for me, it's always my health. It's one thing to eat healthy. That's easy for me, but to make time to work out, as much as I enjoy
that physical aspect. It just seems like such an overwhelming thing. I think a lot of us and a lot of things in life, we can get very all or nothing, right? So for me, if it's not going to be full on, high intensity gym workout with the right workout outfit and everything, if it's not perfect, it just can't happen. So I started this new program 2 weeks ago, that was a win. Just deciding, you know what, I'm going to invest in myself. I'm going to make the time and do this. But I've done that so many times in the past, but it's always at like that 2-week mark where, life gets in the way. I'm not excited about it anymore. Like that cycle of performance, right? Kind of kicks in where all of a sudden I've lost the interest. It's not as motivating and I fall off. Well, I'm happy to say this is week 3. So that is my win, is that it is week 3. And I got my workout in this morning and I've just decided I'm done telling myself I don't have time for stuff. Because if I really want it, I can make time. Everyone has the same amount of hours. And there are other people who work and have families and they still work out. So if I make it a priority and I decide I have time to work out, I just have to decide where that time is going to be in that particular day with what I'm balancing. But I've just kind of had to change that dialogue and do a lot of work in that. And it's amazing, when you start to flex one muscle, other things start to get strong. And so flexing that muscle of just telling myself, I have time, this is important to me, and I need to make it a priority. It is a priority for me. Now, all of a sudden, I'm in week 3 and I've not missed one day of my workout and I'm loving it. And it's creating new habits for me that I feel like I can continue on. And I've kind of built those systems around that I can continue on. But for me, that's my big win. I don't know what the future is going to hold, but normally I don't get to week 3. And so today I'm celebrating I'm in week 3.
No, that is awesome. Congratulations. You broke through that wall and you can certainly keep doing it. And that's such a great point. Everybody has the same amount of time and it is really about your priority and you've got to figure out, and we're going to talk about this today, of course, with balance, but you've got to figure out how you can make sure that you are addressing the priorities in your life first. So how long is your workout?
Every day is a little bit different. So like I said, I invested with a trainer, doing a program. I'm doing it with one of my best friends as well. So
that's great.
She lives in Nashville and I live in Oregon. So we're keeping each other accountable virtually every single day, letting each other know we got the workout in. So today was fasted sprints.
Awesome.
Yesterday was like a HIIT training. Yeah. So every day is a little bit different, which I think also helps to keep it fun and interesting so it doesn't get so boring.
It does. It helps that emotionally and psychologically for you, but it's also better for your body because the muscle memory what we found is that for runners, you actually have diminishing returns the longer you run because your body just gets so used to it. But when you switch up like that, it's just amazing the benefits you can see. So awesome. That's a great win. Great win.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm excited to get into this topic. We are going to talk about the 8 pillars of balance. And I'm going to say for busy women, because we're all busy women. So the 8 pillars of balance for busy women. Can you tell us a little bit about the structure? And I know you talk about it on your podcast, Your Life Rocks. Love your podcast. Checked it out. Really great stuff. So let's get into this. 8 pillars of balance.
Yeah. So, this really came about when I first started Your Life Rocks, it was really like purely like Your Life Rocks because so many working women that I knew, it was more about, life is hard and it's horrible and it's stressful and it's exhausting and it can be those things. But like you said earlier, what we focus on grows. And so I wanted to kind of cast that message of, your life doesn't stink. Your life actually really rocks as a working mom, like as a busy woman. When you have these multiple passions and things you get to pour yourself into, it can be amazing. So kind of, again, switching that focus. But the more I started talking with other women and kind of seeing where they were, I noticed that they were really struggling with balancing all of the key priorities in life and really finding how do you fit all of that into your calendar. And you might have things you want to do in these areas, but what does that really look like? And for me, I am very much a systematic, habitual person. And so for me, being a woman who has kids and works full time and travels for work, I really have had to create a lot of systems for myself in my life in order, for things to work. Otherwise, things just kind of fall apart. And they had fallen apart at one point in time. And it was through that process of trying to rebuild and bring things back together that I had really kind of identified these 8 areas of life that I need to make sure I'm consistently checking in with myself on. And it's not that they're equal in priority, but without 1 or 2 or 3 of some of these areas of our life, things can get broken really easy, and we can start to feel run down and not always know why, not always be able
Right.
to put our finger on it to know what is missing in our life. And so those 8 areas are your faith, your marriage, parenting, career, home, finances, health, and friends and fun. So friends and fun are kind of lumped in together, but it's kind of that social, positive passion area. But sometimes we can get really focused in on, just like 2 or 3 or 4 of these areas and not pay attention to the other ones. But when we do that, we're really doing a huge disservice to ourselves.
You're so right. And I was just talking to, I believe her name was Dr. Sandra, and the episode about the types of rest. And she spoke about the same thing. And we talked about the fact that it's almost like a multivitamin or vitamins in our body. And we need all of them. And when you're missing one, your entire system and your ecosystem in your body is off. And so it's not like you can just, double up on vitamin C and you're good. If your vitamin D is low, it doesn't matter. So I see the same thing with 8 pillars of balance. It's kind of the same thing. It's your vitamins for your soul or for your psyche to be able to feel level and equal. So I love it.
Yeah, thank you.
So the first one is faith.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that.
So my podcast is very much from that evangelical Christian perspective. And so faith is a huge part of what we do at Your Life Rocks. It's a huge part of my life. When we talk about creating balance in your life at Your Life Rocks, we really talk about 3 main rocks, 3 main stones. And faith is a huge part of that. And then another one is community. And then the last one is systems. But, faith is one of those things that I feel like it's either we are just checking it on a box. So we're either going to church on Sunday or we're reading a book or listening to a podcast or whatever it might be for whoever's listening to this, right? Where it's just a check in the box. Or we might have an idea in our head of what that is, and we don't subscribe to that. So then we check out. When we talk about all of these 8 areas, they're not things that you just check off. Although from a system standpoint, and when you look at starting to build habits, it can feel like that. But that's really not what it's about, right? It's that difference between execution and intention. And really the intention is that you are keeping yourself in connection with the fact that there's bigger things out there than just you, that you are finding those ways to grow and to seek that quiet time to be able to tap into a higher power. For me, and all of these areas are going to look different for everybody, but for me, it's really spending time with Jesus. It's spending time in prayer, spending time reading my Bible. And if I get so busy in life that I miss that one and I just say, okay, well, I'm going to church on Sunday and that's good enough. But if that's not really filling into the intention of having that faith, if it's just adding another to-do into my life, I'm not actually getting any benefit from it. And the whole point of these 8 areas is it's not just a requirement for life. It's really about giving us that fullness of life, that abundance of life that really meets us from all those different perspectives.
I love that you say that, because for busy women, I know I have a to-do list a million miles long, and I'm sure you do as well. And it's so easy to say, okay, I'm going to add these 8 pillars. Let me just check off. But it's really not about that checking off. It's about experiencing and feeling. And so I'm so glad that you said that. And yes, it's good to have them written down because you need to focus on it, but not think of it as like a to-do list. It's more of a to-live list, right? How to be and live.
Exactly. Yeah. If we look at it as a to-do list, then you're just going to get even more overwhelmed,
right?
and stressed out and not want to do anything. So we definitely don't want to look at it through that lens.
Beautiful. So our marriage, of course, is going to be a big part of that balance.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, really when we look at marriage, for me, marriage has one of those multiple different levels and it's such a complex relationship, right? It's one of the most complex relationships we would probably have.
Ever, yes.
Yes, absolutely. And so I think that there are different points in that. And certainly I've worked with women who, are newlyweds and people who have been married for many, many years. And so it's one of those relationships that has different depths depending on where you are in it. But regardless of what your situation looks like, there are different points in there that feed you, right? For me, my husband is my number one supporter. I mean, for many years, he was a stay-at-home dad while I worked.
That's awesome.
Absolutely. I mean, praise him for that. But, it's one of those things where I need to make sure that I am providing what I need to do. So when we look at these 8 areas, and especially with marriage, it's our personal accountability to that relationship. It's not necessarily what's the marriage as a whole, or, what's the health of my marriage? How can I make my marriage better? But it's, am I doing the things that I know are going to contribute to that relationship? So for example, I can complain all day long about things my husband is not doing or the things I think he should be doing. But at the end of the day, I have to flip that mirror around and say, okay, but am I doing everything I can be doing for that relationship? Am I treating him the way that I would want him to be treating me, or anybody else really for that matter? And so personal accountability is so huge in that, because it is a relationship that's so close to us. It's really easy to turn around and point fingers. And so when we can focus in on what we are doing, one, it empowers us to have the best relationship ever, because we're not dependent then on someone else to be able to provide that. But then two, it also enables us to create that support system that we really feel like we need it now. And I know not everyone is in a super supportive marriage or relationship. And so it is a process, right? Of figuring out where you are and where you want to be. But again, what can you personally do to take that accountability and to empower yourself to build that kind of support and relationship that you want to have in your life?
Yes. And when you always flip the mirror back on yourself, then you're recognizing that you do really, number one, you control your life by your thoughts and your actions. And then of course, it controls your mood and your behaviors. But it's so important to turn that mirror back, because no matter what in the world anybody else is doing, the only thing you can control is yourself. And people don't realize how much influence our behaviors, our words have on other people, and how, yes, it takes two in a marriage. No doubt it does. It takes two people to have a healthy marriage, but one person can significantly influence the relationship. And you as a woman, as yourself, you can influence not only your marriage and your husband, but also yourself and the way that you see the marriage. And that goes way back to the positive outlook.
Yep, absolutely.
Wonderful. So the next one is parenting. That relationship is another one. I mean, it evolves both, even with marriage, you were talking about that relationship with your husband. And the thing about marriage is that our romantic relationships, they tend to trigger so many issues that we have from our past, and we bring them into our marriage. And so often we're not even relating to just our husband, but whatever the representation, that he has of people in our history or in our upbringing. And children in some ways do the same thing.
Yes.
Little different, but they do.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, when we start looking at some of these things, and this is one of the areas that brings this up the most, is like guilt and shame and expectations. And, there's a lot that goes into how we identify ourselves as a parent, as a mom. And I think so much of it is based off of our own past. Who was our mom to us, and
right.
And what do we want to do differently? What examples have we had in being a mom? Because some people have had great moms. They have a great example on what they can look to. And then there are other people who haven't. And I think all of that can get really easily reflected here. And especially in today's society where there's social media and there's YouTube videos and there's everything about, what kind of parent are you? What kind of mom are you? And it can allow us to kind of borrow some of those ideas from other people, which can be healthy, but can sometimes not be so healthy. And so when we look at this parenting piece, I think it's really, really important that one, we give ourselves some grace over this area of our life, but really be able to define for ourselves without anyone else's input on what it means to be a good mom, because it is going to be a very different for everybody, and not to let that be a measuring stick on how well you're doing in this area, because everyone's life is very, very different. And I think that that's where we really have to do that soul searching to figure out what works best for us.
You're right. And every family is different. Every child is different. So what one child needs, another child doesn't necessarily need. But I love that you said that stress is the tension point between reality and expectation. When we start to have those expectations of ourselves as a parent and they're not realistic, then of course we start to have stress. And I was just working with somebody a couple of weeks ago, and I might have talked about this on another podcast, but he was talking about his work and how he had, I think 150 emails he had to, address and respond to every single day, and how much pressure he put on himself regarding that. And I asked him, I said, is that realistic? Can you really tackle those 150 emails every single day? And he said, no. And so I said, well, then your expectation, and he was the boss, and so he could have changed this. And I said, your expectation is not realistic. And so you will always be in a space of stress when you are expecting to do something or be something that you absolutely can't be. So you have to change those expectations. And I love that you talk about that with parenting, is you have to really look at what works for me, what works for my family, what works for my kid, because it's different than that other lady and her kid and her family.
Absolutely. And that same thought carries through to all of these areas. But, for example, I've put pressure on myself for years to have like the traditional family dinner, everyone sitting around the dinner table and talking about their day. And, for my family, that just doesn't necessarily work. And so I had to let go of that expectation and say, okay, well, what does work for our family? And oftentimes we have dinner just standing up around the island in the kitchen. And, sometimes one of my kids starts eating before, everybody else is there. But I had to let go of that expectation because it was like, why does it really matter?
Right.
What's the intention behind it? And is the intention just that we're connecting? Okay, well, then why does it matter if we're all sitting down around the table? And, certainly there are times where it's important to teach my kids manners about having meals with other people so they don't just grow up as barbarians, especially raising boys. But, for the day-to-day thing, why put that extra stress on myself? Why try to put that expectation on myself when ultimately it doesn't necessarily feed into the core of who I am or what my family is going to be about? And that is probably very different. Someone else, from their value standpoint, that could be the number one priority, is that they have that time and that their kids are growing up with that memory. But that's just not our reality. And I've had to come to the terms with, you know what, that's okay. That's okay that mine is different than yours. And that's totally fine.
Yeah. And I love that you said that, because I've noticed with my kids, like the things that I think about from my childhood that are super special, really feel good memories that I might try to recreate with my kids, it doesn't happen for them. So then when they're talking about something that they loved, in their younger years, it's something that I never would have even thought, oh, that really mattered to you? You really loved that? Because they have a totally different experience. So I love that you say that, because sometimes we have those shoulds, like, oh, we should create this experience for our kid, but we don't realize that it's not even doing what we, intended for it to do. That's really about us, right?
Exactly.
Not about them.
Exactly. Yeah. Some of the best advice I ever have received as a parent was to ask my kids how they feel most loved from me. Like, what do I do that makes you feel most loved? And you know what? Like, I had go over the moon trying to make birthdays special or, make Saturday morning special or like whatever, right? Like, I put so much stress and pressure on myself. And one of them said, I love it when you sit next to me when I'm playing video games.
Yes.
Even if we don't talk, I just love the fact that you're there. And the other one says he loves pancakes. And I was like, oh, like the pancakes with the strawberries and like all of the stuff. And he's like, no, the ones out of the box. Those are my favorite.
Oh, really? Oh my gosh,
like,
that's hilarious.
Well, that just simplified my parenting role. There you go.
Oh, love it.
So,
I love that.
It's amazing. When you really get their perspective on what matters most, it makes our life so much easier.
It really does. That goes to the love languages. We're not trying to parent ourselves, our little child. We're actually parenting the children that we have.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
So the next area would be health.
Yeah. So, and keep in mind that all of these areas, it's not like they're prioritized, right? Going back to the fact that it's not necessarily that they're equal and they're not prioritized in order. They're just all part of life. And so sometimes in different seasons of your life, some will take a priority over others. But again, they should all be present. And health is one of those areas that I feel like can really take us out of balance. Either we're not focused on it at all, or we're hyper focused on it. And then other things start to drop off. And, I think a lot of us, especially I've noticed high performing people that tend to take on a lot of extra responsibilities, we can be very much all or nothing. And I shared about this with my win.
Right.
That's totally me. I'm an all, like it's either perfect or it's just, it's Cheetos and gummy bears.
Right.
So, I think with health is one of those things that we can really use it as an area to find a balance within that one area, to figure out what is a healthy middle ground. And yeah, there might be seasons where you push yourself extra hard to be extra healthy. And there might be seasons where or even just days where you fall completely off the wagon and you do eat, gummy bears and chips for breakfast. But I think allowing yourself, again, that grace to know that not every day is going to be perfect, but it is something that we need to focus in on. And even with that, we think about health and we think about, exercise, eating right, maintaining a healthy weight, but it's so much beyond that, right? It's making sure that you have enough sleep. I mean, this is such a performance category, right?
Yes.
To make sure that you can do all of the things that you want to do. If you feel like I'm just too exhausted for life balance, if I just am too grumpy to put up with, my husband and put the best foot forward and shine that mirror back, really, most of those things come back to health, right? Are you sleeping enough? Are you drinking enough water? Are you getting in all the nutrients that you need in order to function as we were designed to function? And oftentimes, the answer is no. And so it's one of those really great measuring sticks where we can really see, like, how well am I actually performing in this area, and how is it then transitioning over into all of these other areas. And it's a really key portion. And I know that there's like a bazillion resources out there for health, and it can get very overwhelming if you decide, like, okay, I really want to focus in on this one area. It can get so crazy overwhelming, but that's where you have to figure out a little bit of what works for you. And again, just taking that one step at a time and really thinking, what can I do today? What can I do today that will go towards positive health? And it might be nothing but drinking water. That's the only thing I can really muster in to do today. Or it might be a workout, or it might be, making sure that you get the right amount of sleep. But it's definitely one of those things that we need to keep kind of in the back of our mind at all times, not just when it's like swimsuit season.
Exactly. Well, the thing about health, though, is that in a lot of those areas, you can actually make them an easy check off. So you can, check off that box for water, check off box for the number of hours of sleep you get, which I think for everybody, I think for me, that is my biggest challenge, is making sure I'm getting sleep, because I'm always cheating myself with my sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a study, and it really is, moms of young kids have the least sleep across the world. It's just a reality. We have so much more on us, and we get, the least amount of sleep, and we really have to focus on that. But yeah, you can make the checkoff boxes, the sleep in the water. And that's why I asked you how long your workout was, because I am definitely that all or nothing person when it comes to working out. And I kind of have a history of being a gym rat, and I have had to limit myself to 30 minutes a day. Now, I do on Sunday mornings, I do 2 hours at the gym, but that's it. That's like my one time. But every other time, it's 30 minutes a day, because that's all that makes sense for my lifestyle and everything that I want to do. And it's hard to limit it. But when I've been able to limit it, I've been able to keep consistent with it. Because if I try to work out for an hour a day, I just can't do it. Even that 30 minutes makes a difference. And so you have to really know yourself and know your schedule and what you can actually do consistently over time. And for me, the 30 minutes has worked. And, my body is awesome doing 30 minutes. But when I try to do an hour and I hit it here, or I hit it there, or I hit it, 1 week and not the next week, I'm not getting the benefit.
And see, and this was, I think, the big thing with me being able to be consistent into week 3 is I have let go of the idea of how long it takes. So, for example, this morning, looking at what was prescribed, it was supposed to be like a 10-minute warm up, and then you do sprints, off and off, running your full out and then walking like for 14 minutes and then like a 15-minute cool down. Well, I didn't have time for all of that. Like, I literally was like, I had to work in the morning. I had a meeting at 6:15 a.m. and then I needed to walk my son to school about 7:30-ish. And I didn't have any meetings in that window. But as soon as I got home from taking him to school at 8 a.m., I was scheduled out until it's time to make for dinner, like back-to-back meetings.
Yeah.
So the only way I would be able to get a workout in is in that little piece of time. Now, it also takes time to get my shoes on, to say I'm leaving the house, I'm going to go run to the family, and then they're going to ask me bazillion questions.
My gosh.
So I could easily tell myself, there's no way, there's no human way for you to be able to get your workout in today. So don't even bother. But I was just saying, you know what? I do have time to work out. It might not be what's prescribed, but I'm going to do my best. And I'm just going to tell myself I have time to work out. And I only, got in half of probably what was required.
But you got it in. Yes.
Exactly. And I made sure that this is my precious time. If I'm not going to have time to do all of the time, I'm going to make it count. So when it was time to sprint, I sprinted so hard. I thought I was going to die. And when it was time to recover, I really focused on my breathing so that I could be ready to sprint again.
That's
Whereas if
great.
I had the full time, I might not have gotten so hard, So I
True.
think it just goes back to what we tell ourselves too, and figuring out what works for our own self.
Love it. That is so true. And yes, it does go back to our reframing it. And I love that you
Mm-hmm.
said, you know what? I do have time to work. I love that. So the next one would be career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or I would also say passion because,
Yeah, for
some
sure.
are working moms and some are stay-at-home moms, and certainly staying at home, that is your career as well. But sometimes we also have outside things that we do that are separate from our family.
Yeah. And, I think sometimes too, when we think about career, like that word, we think, well, the job, but
Right.
really it's whatever you're giving your time and your energy to, regardless of whether you're getting a paycheck for it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we talk about these areas, there are some things, for example, a stay at home mom, home is one of them, and kids is one of them, and finances is one of them. But this is something that you really kind of pour yourself into, that you use your talents for, that you have. And for me, I am a former workaholic or recovering workaholic. I think that will always
Mm-hmm.
be something I struggle with. And, some people kind of throw that word around jokingly, but I will tell you, it is a drug for me. I mean, to be able to pour myself into a task and see it come to fruition, to do things for other people, like that's my drug. And I have to be very, very careful because I could literally work from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed and not have a problem with it because I just love it so much. And so I
Right.
have to be really careful with this area of my life that I don't overdo, kind of like with you with the
Mm-hmm.
gym, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I have to really put some strong boundaries and perimeters around this area. And I think for, all kinds of different people, you might have a different area that speaks to you this way. I know one of my friends, she's a super social person. So for her, fun and friends is where she has to be really careful
Oh, yes.
because she could just have fun 24/7 and be happy, right? While, she's going into foreclosure because she didn't pay the mortgage. So
Right.
we have to kind of find that balance between all of them. But for me, career is one of those areas. I have to really be strong with systems. I have to be strong with boundaries. And I have to have the people around me. And this is why community is so important because you need to have those people around you who know you well enough to say, you keep saying you're too busy. I've noticed you said that like 5 times this week. So I'm just saying, you got to kind of check yourself because I see a pattern starting to form. And so that's why community is so important, whether it's friends or your husband or whoever it is, but having those people around you that can speak truth to you on those areas that they see you kind of starting to swallow into is really, really important.
That is so good because my best friend Rosie, I've had her on my show twice. She just said this to me, I think it was last week. Maybe she said it again too, and I didn't pay attention. But she's like, Zoe, you need to drop something. You need to let something go. And I mean, she's known me forever, and I definitely have gotten more busy recently. And yeah, she will call me on it because she knows that's an issue I have. I'm a workaholic as well, recovering. But she will do the same thing. And you're right. That's so important to have people in your life who know you and love you and can speak to you with honesty.
Yeah, it's really, really critical. I mean, especially for me with this career area, because I do get so excited about different things and I see
Mm-hmm.
possibilities and I'm really living and working within my gifting. And I think that that's
Mm,
where it gets hard to balance is because, it's like, well, God gave me these skills for a reason. He gave me this
yes.
ability for a reason. And who am I to not do it? But again, it can really suck us in and it can become our identity too. And this is one of those other things that we have to be very careful with the career or passion side of us is that it can become our identity of
Yes.
what we do and what we get out of what we do. And really it's not who we are. Who we are is who we are. This is just
Mm-hmm.
what we choose to be using our gifts for. And anyone who's transitioned from, one job to another job or different job function, I think a lot of people, this day and age kind of jump around a little bit in their career.
Mm-hmm.
We know like it's just a job title, right? But yet it becomes so much more kind of under our skin. And we have to be really, really careful with those boundaries to do that. But then on the flip side of that, if maybe you are really grudgingly going to work or you have a job that you don't necessarily love so much and you wish you could just be home, it is
Yeah.
also important though to look at what is your gifting? Are you in the right place? Are you able to be that influence to other people and give back to this world? I think we all have things that we innately have within us that the world needs. And if you're not in a place yet where you have discovered what that is, that's really where you have to invest and grow in to figure that out for yourself. Because when you do and you can unlock that, it's amazing the impact that you can have on the people around you.
It absolutely is. And, some people will do that for their work and some people will do that just as a passion. But I think it's so important. And that's why I say we need to discover our superpowers, the ones that we are innately born with, because we are born to share them with the world.
Absolutely.
So I love that. And I was listening or reading something that you put out there about balance, because there's always, that saying, well, you can't really have true work-life balance. That was the podcast I was listening to. And you were saying that actually you can. And I love that you kind of reframed it, because I'm sure I've probably said on this podcast, it's not possible to have it all at one time. You have to do it in seasons is really what I talk about. But I love the concept of that idea that yes, you can have balance.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you think about this. This hit me one day. I was listening to another podcast and they were talking about balance and how it's just not possible, for those of us that work and are trying to manage a family. And then the person said something that was like, what? Like it was one of those moments I will never, ever forget. And she said, there's no way I will ever have equal time in the office and that same amount of time focused on my kid. And the reason why that struck me so much is I never dawned on me that balance was an equal time. It's not like I spent 8 hours in the office, so now I have to spend 8 hours with my kids. Otherwise, my life is out of balance. But that was her perspective.
Interesting.
And the thing that I found so interesting about that is when we talk about work-life balance, and if you really start like researching it, I mean, even just Googling it, right? We'll find a bazillion different ways that people have a perception of what that means, what it looks like, what it is that you have to do. I mean, even from like an HR perspective, right? In the office, if a company has good quote unquote work-life balance, there might be, better vacation time or telecommuting options or, different maternity
Flex
leave
stuff,
plans.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a completely different definition depending on where you're coming it from. And what hit me is that we can define balance for ourselves however we want.
Right.
The thing is, I never want to live in a world where something is not possible. Like to me, that just feels like such a closed mind thinking. Like, peace is not possible. Happiness is not possible. Because if we say balance is not possible, then what else is not possible? And I'm always telling my kids, like anything is possible. You can make anything happen if you get the right minds together or you learn the right skills. Or I heard a quote once that anything is possible with God and Google. And I totally believe in that, so
I love that.
yeah. So I was just like, well, why would we ever want to live in a world where we're walking around saying, well, you can't have it all. You can't have balance when I can have it all. I just have to figure out what having it all means to me and what I need to do in order to execute on that.
That's beautiful. I love that. So let's get into the actual action steps of what women can do as they look at these 8 pillars of balance: faith, marriage, parenting, health, career, home, finances, and friends, and fun. What are some action steps we can take if we realize, you know what, I feel like I am out of balance. I don't have all of these in my life.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first thing is to really define what that looks like for you and define what your ideal looks like for each of those areas. So just sit down and be like, you know what would I like my marriage to look like? What would be healthy for me in my finances? And don't let anyone else's ideas or ideals shape what that looks like. You really have to decide for you. What does it look like for you? Not for what your mom would say or, what some expert would say or even your best friend would say, but what's good for you and your life for these areas. Because when you get really clear on what your ideal situation is, then you can look at, okay, where am I now? And kind of do a gap analysis. Like what needs to change in order to move from where I am now to where I want to go? And, some of these areas, it's easy to ignore them because there's no pain attached to it. Some of them, like for me, being a workaholic, it's really easy to be like, well, I've been telling my kids, not now, I'm busy, I'm working too
Mm-hmm.
much. That's a huge pain point, right? But then there are other things like, for example, friends and fun. Because I'm a workaholic, like work is fun. So why would I need friends? So it's easy for me to be able to kind of like go into that mode. But if you've been ignoring something for a long period of time, you might be numb to the pain and you might not
Oh.
realize that you need it. Because I guarantee you need all of these 8 areas. But if you're
Mm-hmm.
telling yourself that you don't, there's probably a pain that you've kind of been pushing down or pushing aside or ignoring or even just living with for a long time. If you walk for a long time with a stone in your shoe, after a while, you're going to kind of forget it's there, right? It's not going to
Right.
hurt as bad as when you first feel it. So I think it's important that you really spend some time looking at those 8 areas, figuring out what is that you want and really analyzing where you are right now in all of them. Don't skip one of them because the one that you want to skip is probably the one you want to look deeper at.
That's beautiful. And that is so very true, especially when it comes to our pain points. And also, and that goes back to our self-talk, because I think a lot of times when something isn't going okay in our life or we have something is missing, instead of addressing it, it's easier to rationalize and say, well, I don't really need it. Well, that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really matter because we feel like it would be too painful to look at it and say, I really need this and want this, but I don't know how to get it, or I don't know what I can do to change this in my life. And so what you're asking women to do is actually take it out, look at it, address it, admit that you do need it, and figure out the work that needs to be done to get it in your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially if you think about, again, going back to that all or nothing mentality, not just like what is ideal. Like when you're thinking about the things, right? Like the action things, the things that you need to do in order to get to where you want to go. Think about what can move you closer to your ideal, not what's going to move you across the finish line to your ideal.
Yes.
Because truly, there are going to be days where you're at your ideal and the very next day you won't be
Yes.
in all of these areas because it's always a moving target, right? And there are going to be days where we're stronger, in our health, and there's going to be days where we're stronger in our career, and on those career days you might forget to eat lunch. So it has that ebb and flow to it. But if
Mm-hmm.
you have that mindset of I'm going to do the actions that are going to move me closer versus over the finish line, then you will never be disappointed. Then that stress, that tension point that we talked about earlier between expectation and reality, are not
Mm-hmm.
so far apart because your expectation is that you're moving your reality a little bit closer to where you want to go, not realizing how big of the gap there is between.
Beautiful. I couldn't have put that better. I just love that. And that's also kind of why I went to the 30 minutes a day, because it goes back
Mm-hmm.
to lowering my expectations, which is not a bad thing. It sounds like, say, oh, lower your expectations. But when you're able to do that, then you're able to actually do the journey step by step instead of trying to take on this whole big, chunk that's really not doable. And you get further, and you are more successful when you're able to do that. So I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just real quick, the things that you decide are kind of those action items.
Hmm.
Look at those every single week. Like put an appointment on your calendar to say, okay, I'm going to do my prep for the week ahead. I'm going to not just prep my food, right? When we think about weekly prep, we think about calendar, food, and that's it. But really looking at the week ahead to say, okay, how can I move closer to being the wife I want to be this week? How can I move closer to being the mom I want to be this week? And go through all of those 8 areas. And maybe you're just focusing in on one area that particular week that
Hmm.
I want to move. Like in Your Life Rocks, in our Life Balance membership, we call it moving the mountain. I want to move a mountain in this one area this week. I really
Mm.
want to get closer to my ideal in a huge way for being a parent this week, or in my career this week, or as a friend this week. That's where you're focused in on. And it's not that everything else falls along the wayside, because the whole point in this is that you are, as you're looking at this every single week, you're starting to build systems, you're starting to build habits, you're starting to build your standard operating practices and the way that you
Mm.
show up for all of these 8 areas. And that's really the key, right? Is sometimes we fall into these negative places because of negative habits. So we have to start replacing those negative habits with the ones that give us life, that bring us to where we want to be. And every single week when you have that planning time is a great checkpoint for you to be able to tap in and self-evaluate where you are in all of those areas of life.
I love it. That's great. So built in check times and
Mm-hmm.
maybe Sunday, maybe, before your week starts, really focus and hyper focus on, maybe that one big area and then making sure the other 7 are also coming into play.
Yes, absolutely.
Beautiful. Well, Jenny, this has just been a wonderful conversation, as I knew it would be. Thank you so much. And can you tell listeners how can they get a hold of you? And you have some courses also that are going on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, of course, you can always listen to our show weekly at Your Life Rocks.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we really talk a lot about this practical stuff, right? Like it's one of those podcasts, a lot like yours, where it's very practical. You're going to dive in, get the information you need that you can start applying to your life right away. But I also have put together a free course. It's called Weekly Success Planning. You can sign up for it by going to weeklysuccessplanning.com or yourliferocks.com. You can find it in either place. But that course, it'll kind of walk you through those steps of identifying what it is that you want, where you are, what you need to do, but then also how do you take all of that information that you've gained from that self-reflection and that insight and really put it into practice of creating those habits of that weekly check-in and seeing where it is that you need to be in order to move yourself forward.
Wonderful, wonderful. So all of that information will also be in the show notes. So you can go check that out and connect with Jenny. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure.
That was such a great conversation with Jenny Stemmerman. I can't even think of anything I can say to recap it. I think it spoke for itself, and I hope that you got as much out of it as I did. Of course, now I just think of that one statement that stress is the tension point between reality and expectation. Let's work on closing that gap. And now it's time for a health tip. Our minds and our bodies are intimately connected, and that is why I have a health tip segment. And so the health tip today is actually, it goes along with some of what Jenny and I spoke about today, changing up your workout to get the most benefit. Your muscles work very much like your brain when it comes to figuring out how to do any task in the most efficient way possible. So the longer you do a task, the less work is required to do it. And that's awesome when it comes to your brain and getting stuff done in the world. But it's not so awesome when that 30-minute workout that gave you great results is still taking the same 30 minutes, but it's now giving you diminishing returns. That's not cool. So what should you do? Change it up. There are 2 different ways to change it up. You can do a totally different activity that works opposing muscles or fires them in a different way. Like if you usually do tennis one day, you can go to the gym another day, or you can swim another day, or incorporate a totally different activity. But if you already really enjoy your workout and you don't want to do anything else, then do your same activity differently. Learn how to adjust the workout so that what you're doing is you're firing your muscles differently. For example, if you like to run, incorporate sporadic sprints like Jenny just talked about in your run, or run backwards, or you can do hills, or even you can stop every 5 minutes in the midst of your run and do some calisthenics. Or, if you're in the gym, you can change up by changing weight machines or doing a different free weight or taking a different class. Just change it up to get the most benefit. And that is my health tip for the day. So thanks for tuning in to the Dr. Zoe Show. New shows go up on Tuesdays, every Tuesday morning. And I see that Tuesday mornings I'm getting that spike in listening. So I'm so excited for you subscribers who are listening to the show regularly, and reach out to me. Let me know if there's certain shows that you'd like me to talk about and ask those questions. So subscribe so you don't miss a show. If you're interested in coaching or therapy, or you just want to get a little more help, go to my website at drzoeshaw.com or any of my social medias at the handle Dr. Zoe Shaw. Join my free newsletter by texting the word join to 38470. And I look forward to speaking with you wonderful ladies on social media throughout the week. Have a super week.
You've been listening to The Dr. Zoe Show, redefining your superwoman, with your host, Dr. Zoe Shaw. Don't forget to sign up for her monthly newsletters to get encouragement, tips, and skills for keeping your mind in the superwoman game. Connect with her now at www.drzoeshaw.com. Tell your friends and subscribe to her podcast on iTunes. Join us next time for another edition of The Dr. Zoe Show.